CBS announced during the week that it has 2 new Star Trek shows in development. This is outside of Picard and Discovery. So this is, I think this is also outside of the announcement of the Lower Deck series, which I think is due to start this year at some point. I'm not exactly sure the release date on that. Can find out at a later stage and let you guys know if that comes up. So I think there's a few rumors going around as to what these 2 new Star Trek series might be. One rumor that I've heard is obviously there's a lot of popularity around for the Captain Pike series. So obviously Anson Mount's character in the last season of Discovery was immensely popular, and there was a huge fan outpouring of support for a potential TV series that featured him and the number 1 character and young Spock or whatever on the Enterprise. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not that ends up being one of the new shows that is in development by CBS. There's also another rumor I heard that maybe I think there was the place where you go to register like the trademark for certain names. I think CBS or the production company that does Discovery trademarked the Starfleet Academy title. So there's also some rumors spreading around that Starfleet Academy could be a potential series, which would be interesting. But whatever form that takes, hopefully, obviously, if it's a Pike series, it's going to be another prequel show. But hopefully, if it's a Starfleet Academy series, that will be a forward-looking show, perhaps in either Picard's era or maybe even in that time frame that's set up in between, say, Star Trek Nemesis and Picard, perhaps. Just obviously, I've always got a bias, I suppose, towards sequel shows rather than prequel shows, because when you do a prequel show, I think there's always a certain you have to end up at a certain place. You are pigeonholed a little bit in terms of what storytelling you can do. Certain characters aren't going to die if they turn up in a later series and so forth. So there's always a few more restrictions, I think, involved in doing a prequel series as opposed to a sequel series. So yeah, hopefully that will be the case if that is the situation. Obviously, also in the news this week, CBS made a more official announcement that Star Trek Picard would be renewed for a 2nd season before even 1 episode has gone to air. So this is either incredible confidence on their behalf that the show is just so amazingly good that it's going to go for a 2nd season even before we know any of the ratings or anything like that as what's coming from the series. Or it could just be one of those little marketing tactics where perhaps they're a little bit worried that people may be reluctant to tune in, and they just want to give audiences a certain level of confidence to say, hey, this show is around, it's not going anywhere. Let's everybody go watch this show. Go watch the show because it's going to have a season 2. So it's just, I think, there's a certain element of giving audiences confidence that it's not going to get axed after 3 episodes or something like that. So that would be my take on that. Other bits and pieces in the news that I saw was the fact that in the news, I think in the last week or so, I read there've been a few rumors circulating, going back several years, I believe, to the possibility that Quentin Tarantino might direct a Star Trek film. I think I remember hearing these rumors first going back way back when, even sort of maybe even before he did his most recent film, which was Hateful Eight, I believe. So the rumors have been circulating a while. I think there was some talk about Tarantino doing a Star Trek film. But more recently in the news, I think in the last week or two, it's come out that he's completely closed the door on doing a Star Trek film. Which is that a huge loss? I don't know. I never really kind of thought Quentin Tarantino and Star Trek were two things that went hand in hand. It didn't seem to me like a marriage made in heaven, so to speak. I mean, what would a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film appear like? I sort of think about that in my mind. I think, what is the character's going to be? Sitting in 10 forward, eating some junk food, comparing how some sort of Federation meal or what it's called on Earth versus what they call it on Vulcan, and then the characters walk in slow motion down the corridor to some 1970s soul rock track, and then everybody ends up on the bridge and everybody's got bare feet with their feet up on the consoles. It never particularly seemed like a Tarantino Star Trek film would be something that would be a really good fit. But anyway, other Star Trek film news. I think there's still some toyings around with this notion of a Star Trek 4, but in the Kelvin universe with Chris Pine and Chris Hemsworth and all this sort of stuff. But I almost feel like the door's been shut on that now. Hopefully this Noah Hawley series or film or whatever will take over from that. And yeah, I think let's put the Kelvin Star Trek to bed. I think it did 3 films, and I think we just want to move on from that now and see something else and different. So hopefully this new Picard series will be entertaining, and it will live up to our expectations, because there's obviously been a fair bit of hype surrounding that over the last few weeks, and people are worried that it's going to be a bit too woke and all that sort of stuff. But I have seen some interviews with Alex Kurtzman and Patrick Stewart. I think providing the series has the overlying theme of hope and not hopelessness. I think if that's the case, I think it will be okay. I obviously they've made some comments in interviews and so forth that the Federation isn't what it was, and that Starfleet has perhaps gone off course a little bit. I think that's fine as far as a storytelling element, because but providing the overall series has a sense of hope about it, and it's not all dystopian, and there's a lot of dystopian shows on out there, and I think we've got enough to worry about in the world. And I think that's one reason why everybody loves Star Trek so much, is it inspires hope. It inspires that notion for us all to be able to do better and inspire greatness. Justin, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Okay, yeah. Quentin. Okay. Each to one's own. I think Quentin Tarantino. I think he's closed the door on it, but it will certainly be an interesting concept. That's for sure. And yeah, I think I did see the episode of ER that he did way back in the day, which was interesting. But yeah, hopefully, if that was the case, he'd be able to switch tones or whatever on that. What do you think makes? What do I think makes something feel hopeful? Obviously Gene Roddenberry's original vision for Star Trek was the sense that humankind has, risen above certain, petty things or whatever. And, whenever there was conflict in the Next Generation series or Voyager or DS9 or whatever, that tended to come from outside influences. The actual core cast or core crew, I think, always everybody tended to get along okay. I think they kind of maybe just pushed the boundaries a little bit with that more in the DS9 series. But I think the conflict came from outside sources. So I think providing in this new series, Picard still, stands for those, values of the Federation, providing he's, trying to sort things out, make them better, and we perhaps get to that in the course of the series. I think it will be hopeful. I think, and that's the thing that most people are worried about, is they don't want this show, the Star Trek Picard show, to be a feeling of a hopeless dystopian world, and I think that would be, if that was the case, that would certainly be against Gene Roddenberry's original vision for the series. So yeah, hopefully that will be the case. So yeah, any questions there for anybody in the audience? Thanks for joining and being part of the very first Sci-Finatics live stream. So let's see what questions we might have from the audience. Fire away, anything, I don't mind. Here we go. Okay, so ZY asks, what is your favorite Star Trek show and why? Okay, look, I'd honestly have to say my favorite Star Trek show would be Next Generation. I think Next Generation is the series that got me interested in Star Trek. I was never really into the original 60s series as a kid. I think I grew up with Star Wars when that came out in 1977. So my real first exposure to Star Trek was I'd seen some of the Star Trek movies that had come out. So I think, I'd seen, Star Trek the Motion Picture, or Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, or whatever, but they didn't really grab me all that much. And it wasn't really until the late 80s when Star Trek Next Generation hit our screens that it really grabbed me. So I think Star Trek Next Generation, and look, really as terms of a crew, the crew on the Enterprise D under the command of Jean-Luc Picard, I mean, you can't go past Jean-Luc Picard as probably the number one, Starfleet captain of all time, really. I mean, as fantastic as Kirk and Sisko and Janeway and Archer, all those guys were, I think Jean-Luc Picard is the pinnacle of the Starfleet captain. So yeah, obviously Next Generation being the first show that really got me into Star Trek, I think that has a special place in my heart for that reason. And obviously from that point onwards, I went through Next Generation, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise. Went through all of those shows when they first came out, and once I'd seen Next Generation from that moment onwards. I have obviously gone back over the years after when I first started watching Next Generation. I went back and watched the original series and so forth. But yeah, it was Next Generation that that originally was the catalyst that got me into Star Trek. So there you go. There you have it. Any other questions, perhaps? Okay. Do you think the show would be based most on time travel, where Picard feels changing history is the last alternative to put things right? Well, yeah, that's a very good question. There were elements. Obviously, it's in a couple of my videos. I did comment as to whether time travel will play a strong part in this new Picard series. And look, we don't know the plot. It's all being kept under wraps quite a bit. So anything we kind of presume is speculation. But yeah, I guess watching a few shots in the trailer, people were asking questions. Why are we seeing old Discovery style shuttles? Why are we seeing these flashback scenes which have got old ships in them and so forth? In the trailers, we see the ship that Picard enlists, the La Serena, firing on an old or having a dogfight with an old Romulan bird of prey back from the the original series era. So I suppose all those old ship model styles, it's like, why aren't we seeing any new ship models? It seemed odd that all of the ships we're seeing in these trailers are all old style Federation ships. So it kind of leads you to think, well, is there going to be a time travel component to this series? So obviously time travel is something that's sort of been perhaps a little bit, I think it was obviously delved into in the last season of Discovery. So it maybe would surprise me a little bit if they opted to go with time travel as a major plot point in Picard, because it's kind of been covered a little bit more recently. But if it fits and if it suits the story of the show, then let's wait and see what it uncovers, I guess, is the question. So I think, providing the writing is interesting, providing the story is well written, providing our characters are good. And obviously, I think there's, in terms of the characters in the new show, it's going to be a little bit of a tough act to follow, I think, in terms of the cast, because we've got Jean-Luc Picard up front and center in this show. And I think that there's always going to be that inclination to compare this new cast of characters that's with him in this series to the original crew and the original cast of Next Generation. So I'm hoping that they're really interesting characters. They're well written. They're not just two-dimensional characters, because I think that was one criticism that I had of Star Trek Discovery, is that most of the characters in that cast don't seem to get much screen time. And I did a video on that, talking about the crew. Another question from Justin. In order for there to be hope, filmmakers need to define the threat or the challenges. This need not be episodic and is often better defined over time in a long story arc. I agree, Justin. It takes time to develop characters, but the characters need to get screen time in order for us to bond with them as an audience. I think a lot of the characters on Discovery get such little screen time that we really don't know them as an audience. So I think hopefully in this new series that each character will have their time in the sun, so to speak, and we learn a bit about them and their connection to Picard and the overall story arc that's going to play out throughout the course of season 1. And that's how we grow to love a show. We grow to love a show based on the characters and their connection to one another in the show, in the cast and in the show. And I think if the characters are good and we bond with them, in the series, I think that's what one of the crucial ingredients that makes a show endure for 7 seasons is, the audience needs to fall in love with them. They just can't be two-dimensional characters. And hopefully that's the case with this new show. We've only got 5 days to go. We're talking at the business end here of the release. So what are we? It's sort of coming up to Sunday now. We're on air with the new show on I think it's Thursday or Friday of this coming week, depending on where you are in the world. Obviously CBS on the 23rd for US viewers, and on Amazon Prime Video for international viewers on the 24th. So I think we're all looking forward to it, and we're all hoping it's going to be great. Any other questions from you guys? Fire away, anything you like. I don't mind. Anything. Okay, so how do you feel about Picard not being on the set of a Starfleet ship, and all the other shows have been on one? So how do you think it will differ? Look, I mean, obviously Patrick Stewart made the comment that he was going to do a new show. He didn't want to put on another Starfleet uniform. And obviously none of the crew in this show, everybody's wearing kind of civilian attire. They're not part of Starfleet. Look, it doesn't bother me so much that it's not sort of a Starfleet ship, because there've been plenty of really great sci-fi series that, that aren't part of a military organization. I mean, the Joss Whedon series Firefly, I think, is a perfect example, where it's sort of it was a bit of a ragtag crew of people that were sort of thrown together, and they weren't all part of a military organization such as Starfleet. So it doesn't bother me so much that they're not all on a Federation ship, cruising the galaxy in Starfleet uniforms. I think first and foremost, if the characters are well written, if the characters are entertaining, if we bond with them as an audience, I think that's first and foremost what I hope for. Look, I'm hoping that during the course of the first season that we will get to see maybe some Starfleet personnel. Maybe we'll get to see some of the new Starfleet ships involved in the show. Maybe if Picard's off on this kind of mission that's a bit off the books, perhaps there might be a Federation ship and its crew kind of out to kind of rein him in a bit, perhaps. I think so. It doesn't worry me that the principal cast and crew aren't on a Starfleet ship, aren't in Starfleet uniforms, providing everyone's providing the cast of characters is well written and entertaining, and we can connect with them as an audience. I think that's first and foremost, the main thing I'm hoping to see. But yeah, it would be nice to see a Starfleet ship of some kind pop up in the series, just to kind of see, what the technology looks like, in 2399 or whatever year this new series is set to be taking place in. So yeah, any other questions there? By all means, I'll have a drink to keep my voice going. Okay, so if I was to create a Star Trek show, what would it be about? Okay, look, I think I do remember reading something, and I think this was around probably just after Nemesis, that they were toying with the idea of it, if they were to do another movie after Star Trek Nemesis came out, that it was going to be like a joint film that utilized cast members from not only Next Generation, but also Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And that really piqued my interest. I thought, this could be a really interesting show. So I think I would almost, it would be like a Star Trek All-Stars show, I guess you'd call it. So taking maybe some of the, beloved characters from Next Generation, DS9 and Voyager, and just throwing them into a melting pot, together, and see what happens, So I think, some kind of Star Trek All-Stars show, because there's so much great talent in the past series, and I think everybody wants to know what everybody's up to. What are these characters that we've spent so many years watching that are beloved? What are they up to now? What have they been up to? Let's throw them together in a situation and see what how that comes. Question from Charles. How do you feel about the rumors about Starfleet Federation have become more inwardly looking rather than seeking out new life and new civilizations? That's a good question. Look, there's obviously a piece of the puzzle we haven't quite found out yet, because obviously there's something that's happened, whether it's something to do with the Romulan supernova, whether it's something to do with these rogue synths that have been mentioned in the Children of Mars short film. So there's obviously some pretty major occurrences that have happened over the course of the last 20 years to Starfleet that have got them to change their mantra. Look, I think obviously Starfleet is sitting in a place that isn't where we remember them to be, and we're obviously going to find out in the course of the show what elements have caused that. But I think first and foremost, providing we're striving to get back to where they were. I think I can take the fact that Starfleet and the Federation has become more inwardly looking, and they've gone perhaps going down this path that's not the Starfleet or Federation that we remember. That's fine, providing, I think, in the spirit of Gene Roddenberry's vision, they are striving to, there is the ultimate goal there to get back to where they were. Providing, I think, they're not all, no, we've shut the doors, we've completely cut people off, and we're not interested in this anymore. I would be disappointed if that was the case. I don't mind that if Starfleet's taken a turn for the worst, providing there is aspiration and goal there to ultimately get back to where they were. And I think that's a big part of the core of the Federation, the core of Starfleet. So yeah, providing there's hope in this show that it doesn't worry me that things have gone downhill, providing they want to get back up to the top of the hill again as an ultimate objective. And I think that's the first and foremost. Vanessa asks, is there a Picard theme or music that you know of? I believe there is. I haven't heard anything yet, and to my knowledge, nothing has been released online yet in regards to the music. I know that Jeff Russo is the composer of the score for Star Trek Picard, Jeff Russo being the same composer that has done the music for Star Trek Discovery. The only thing that I've no worries, Charles. Pleasure to answer your question. The only thing I'm aware of in terms of the music for Star Trek Picard, I've heard that the opening sequence is a little bit like a James Bond style opening sequence. So all of you out there who are perhaps familiar with the classic James Bond opening title sequence, I hear that the Picard opening title sequence is a little bit like a James Bond style sequence. I haven't heard anything in terms of the theme. I've heard that it's an uplifting theme. I've heard that it may even, for those of you that remember the Next Generation episode, The Inner Light, which is probably one of the favorite Next Generation episodes, the one where Picard gets trapped inside that probe or whatever, and he lives an entire lifetime in the space of a few hours, where he learns to play, I think someone will have to correct me if I'm wrong, is it the Resican flute? Do you guys remember it? I think it's Resican. He learns to play the flute in this Inner Light episode. And I've heard that maybe the theme of Picard in some ways takes elements of that as a homage, which would be interesting. I remember the music that he plays on the flute being quite a sort of I suppose a bit of a haunting tune, and but I think providing the theme is memorable and stirring and up, and has got that gravitas to it that inspires Jean-Luc Picard, I think that'll be good. I think the Discovery, I haven't ever been a massive fan of the Star Trek Discovery theme music. It's one of those themes that I hate to say it, that you almost forget what it is while you're listening to it. It's not perhaps as catchy or melodic as you want it to be. So yeah, hopefully Star Trek Picard will have a great theme that is memorable and stirring, and invites and reflects the gravitas and nobility that is Jean-Luc Picard. What is my favorite Star Trek theme? Look, I'd have to say the Next Generation theme, really. I mean, obviously the Jerry Goldsmith theme that was originally composed for Star Trek the Motion Picture, and then was used again, I think, in Star Trek V, and that was adopted, obviously, by Next Generation as its theme. I think that's probably one of the most stirring pieces of Star Trek music that there is. Probably next to that, I'd probably say Voyager would probably be my second favorite theme, I think, after Next Generation, and obviously Deep Space Nine after that. I was never a massive fan of the creative choice in Enterprise to use a pop song as the show's theme. I think there's nothing more rousing than an orchestral theme, I think, to inspire you and to get you in the mood for watching some great Star Trek. The music they used in the poker scene with Data clip really got. Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there's been a few moments in the trailers for Picard where they have used little snippets of the Next Generation theme in there, and I got to say, it kind of brings a little lump to your throat. I think there's nothing more than that theme and that recognizable Jerry Goldsmith score for the Next Generation theme to really kind of make you nostalgic and to put that little lump in your throat, particularly when you see Picard talking to Riker and Troy and all that sort of stuff. There's a real kind of heartfelt bond, I think, that stirs feelings within you when you hear that music playing in the background. So yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed that the theme and music for Picard is going to be a memorable one. Yeah, I kind of agree, Justin. I think yes, the Enterprise pop song was cringe-inducing. I think I think they tweaked it a little bit. I think the first season, was a bit off, and then I think they maybe in later seasons in the show they kind of did a slight rearrangement of the music to make it a little bit better. But I think stick to the orchestral themes. I think they're definitely the way to go. Let me just take a sip of water. Fire away any questions you guys have got. Okay. Is there anything I would change about Star Trek to improve it, or do you think it's in a good place right now? I guess it depends on what. Look, I think if we're talking about Discovery, I think Discovery has room for improvement. I certainly think season 2 of Discovery was a vast improvement on the first season, and I think that at least the producers of Discovery listened to the criticisms of Discovery season 1 and course corrected a few of those in season 2. So all the problems people were complaining about in terms of the Klingon makeup and some of the storytelling aspects were corrected in some form in season 2. So I think it's at least good that the producers are listening to the fans, because, well, we only have to look at Star Wars, don't we, to see what happens when people don't listen to the fan base. Star Wars went completely off the rails with The Last Jedi because Rian Johnson just completely basically said, screw the fans, I'm going to do what I want to do. And, and that film was fairly disastrous for the Star Wars franchise. So
I think, I've seen some interviews with Alex Kurtzman, and I've seen some interviews with Patrick Stewart that have kind of given me a little bit of confidence. There's obviously some few bits and pieces that, I think have been troubling people in terms of directions that Star Trek is heading. But there've also been some things that have, given me a bit of confidence. Like I saw an interview with Alex Kurtzman the other day, which I read, where he said, for example, if Worf was going to ever make an appearance in Star Trek Picard, he would look like the Worf we remember. He wouldn't look like a Discovery Klingon. Alex Kurtzman made that very clear, is that Worf would absolutely, without a doubt, appear in the makeup we remember him and not look like some sort of bizarre Discovery style Klingon, and then he would have to look the same. So that did get a few brownie points for Alex Kurtzman when I read that. So I thought, that's good that he's at least acknowledged that, and I think that's a really good thing that he's made that quite clear. Because I think if they took Worf and they discoveryized his makeup, I think there would be an absolute rebellion of Star Trek fans smashing the door down at CBS, calling for blood. So, I think that's a good piece of information that I did read recently about the direction. And I also read, in regards to the makeup, that in terms of the Romulans, that the Romulan makeup was going to vary a little bit between different Romulans in Star Trek Picard. So we've obviously seen quite a different look in the Romulans in Picard than we have in other series. With the ones we've seen most recently haven't had the forehead V that was established in Next Generation, but we've also seen in the trailers that some, I think what Alex Kurtzman said was that there's some Romulans that are just going to have the ears, some are going to have the forehead V, some are going to look a little bit different. So I think he made a reference to the fact that on Earth there are different looking human beings. Obviously, we have Caucasians and Negro and Asians and Hispanic, and there's such a diverse range of cultures and ethnicities and stuff on Earth as human beings, as we are. We're a diverse people. So it would stand to reason that there would be other cultures, such as Klingons or Romulans, that there would be Klingons of different from different colonies or different areas where the look would be slightly different. So that's I think an interesting way of bridging the gap between multiple Star Trek series that have obviously over the years established a different look between the different races. Another question, so Charles, what do you think of the rumors of the Picard show possibly having a link with Discovery? It definitely seems like that's the direction that it's heading down, in terms of, because we've seen in Discovery at the end of season 2 that they end up 1,000 years in the future, and from the trailers of season 3, it definitely looks like either the Federation isn't in existence anymore, or it's pared down to a very, very small shadow of its former self. So it obviously seems like we could have a situation where what we're going to be seeing in Star Trek Picard could play out ultimately down the track in Discovery. And look, I think it all boils down to what I was talking about before, in terms of we need to see hope in this show. We need to see hope. We can't just have this dystopian future in Picard where, the whole universe has gone to crap, and in Discovery it's still gone to crap 1,000 years later. I would be disappointed if that was the case. I think there needs to be an element of hopefulness, out of the show. It's fine that things have gone astray, but we need to aspire to getting back to the place that they were in, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because hopefully that in Discovery, they end up in a place perhaps where the Federation isn't in existence anymore or something. So look, I think I would be disappointed, I think, if the show is too doom and gloom. It can't be too doom and gloom, because that's not Gene Roddenberry's vision for Star Trek, and by making it all doom and gloom and dystopian and so forth, then you're pretty much taking Gene Roddenberry's vision and, throwing it out the window. And I think that would be disappointing. But yeah, I think things can go astray and things can go off course, but I think providing there's still hope and there's still that aspiration to bring it back to where it was ultimately, I think that is the main thing. And hopefully that will be the case. If you could give any of the shows an extra season, what show would you choose? Okay. So yeah, Zipboy says I would say DS9, as it ended with Sisko going into the wormhole, and it would be nice to see a follow-up to that. Yeah. I think you're probably right there. I think the Next Generation season played out in terms of its storytelling quite satisfactorily, and I think Voyager did the same. I mean, Voyager made it home. It told its story. But yes, there was, out of all of the Star Trek series, I think you're right. I think DS9 definitely left things a little bit more up in the air. I think, because if I'm not mistaken, I think Cassidy Yates, Sisko's partner, wife. You're welcome, Charles. Thank you for joining us in the live stream, mate. Thank you very much for coming along. I think Cassidy Yates was pregnant, if I'm not mistaken, with Sisko's child right at the end of the show. So obviously we end the show with Sisko off in the wormhole with the Prophets. We've got Cassidy Yates pregnant with his child. I agree. I think it would be nice to see what's going on with the characters in DS9 again. I concur with your assessment there of another season of DS9 would have been interesting. Out of all the shows, I think it was, as you say, the one that had the most perhaps plot things up in the air at the end that we could, find out later on how that panned out. Justin asks, if we define hope as overcoming adversity, the new series can provide it. It would be careful about hoping for the show returning to what it was, as if it did that, it would fail to develop. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, that's right. I think the story of Voyager was kind of told in a lot of sense. I think, seeing Harry Kim return to his mum or whatever, and play the clarinet for her or something, we don't need to see that. I think we don't need to see that. Hopefully though, we'll get to see some characters pop up in Star Trek Picard, just as, even if it's just as cameos, just to know what they're up to. Didn't Ronald D. Moore get the writers together? Yes. That's correct. If you guys haven't seen it, there's a documentary called What We Left Behind. It's a documentary made by Ira Stephen Bear, who was the showrunner of Deep Space Nine, and it's a retrospective kind of look back at DS9 with the cast and crew and some of the production team. It's definitely worth a look. It was a great documentary, and they actually, part of that documentary is they actually got, I think it was Rene Echevarria and Ronald D. Moore and Ira Stephen Bear and another one or two of the writers from the show, all to kind of sit in a writer's room and break what would be the first episode of a new season of Deep Space Nine. And it's actually quite intriguing. If you guys haven't seen it, it's definitely worth a look. They actually take the story, and they do sort of animated sort of storyboards to kind of showcase what the episode would be. It's quite entertaining, and actually the story that they come up with is actually quite good. And you actually go, oh hey, I definitely watch that. I definitely watch that show. I definitely tune in to see that. So yeah, if you guys haven't seen the What We Left Behind or What We Leave Behind, I'm not sure the actual. It's one of those two titles. Definitely worth checking out. And also has interviews with Aaron Eisenberg just before he passed away. So I think he appears in the documentary, and then literally like a month or two after What We Left Behind. Thank you, Zed. And then yeah, literally about a couple of months, unfortunately, after the documentary came out, unfortunately, Aaron Eisenberg, who played Nog in the series, passed away. So yeah, definitely worth catching up on if you guys haven't seen that documentary. Cornelius, okay, Cornelius is asking, I think we're going to learn that the Romulans have been experimenting with Borg tech since the last episode of Next Gen, season 1, with the disappearance of the outposts on both sides of the neutral zone. That's interesting, because that's right. You're right, because wasn't there Cornelius? Wasn't there some sort of reference to in one of those episodes of Next Generation? I'm not sure whether it was in the first Best of Both Worlds at the beginning of that, or was it? I'm trying to remember which episode it was. There was some sort of reference when the Borg first showed up, that whether the Enterprise was on patrol near the neutral zone, or there was, I remember there was some reference to the neutral zone in there in one of those very first episodes where the Borg showed up in Next Gen. So that's actually a very interesting point, because obviously one thing we haven't really delved into in Star Trek in that much detail is how other races interact with other races apart from the Federation. We have tended to see a lot of things from the Federation's perspective. So how the Federation relates to the Klingon Empire, how the Federation relates to the Romulan Empire, how the Federation relates to the Borg Empire, and all that sort of stuff. But one thing we haven't really kind of delved into in a huge degree is how the Klingons relate to the Romulans, how the Klingons relate to the Borg, how the Borg relate to the Romulans, and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's a very interesting avenue that kind of hasn't been pursued all that much in Star Trek before. One thing I'm really enjoying, or I picked up on the more recent Star Trek Picard countdown comics that have come out recently, is the fact that when Picard and Raffi and so forth go down to this Romulan colony that's trying to be evacuated because of the impending Romulan supernova, you get to see, for example, Romulan's perspective of something like the Prime Directive, where the Romulans just moved into this planet that was already occupied by another race of beings, and they basically had no qualms whatsoever about just moving in and taking over, despite there being a kind of a primitive sentient race already in existence on this planet. So one aspect of those comic series, and potentially what will also play out, I think, in the Picard series, or perhaps as a prelude to the Picard series, is this notion of how other Star Trek races relate to each other, and what you've said there, Cornelius, is on the money. That how have the Romulans responded to the Borg coming into the Alpha Quadrant, and I think, as you say, I think whether that's going to play out as a major part of the new show with Romulans, experimenting with Borg technology. We obviously see in the trailer there's obviously a big Borg cube there that seems to be occupied by a primarily Romulan crew, or Romulan crew is probably the wrong expression, probably Romulan workforce, it would appear. Jared asks, would love for the Delta Quadrant to be revisited in Picard or a Star Trek show in the Delta Quadrant. Yeah, we kind of had that with Voyager. I think obviously the whole series of Voyager took place in the Delta Quadrant. So we've kind of probably done the Delta Quadrant to a certain extent, and obviously the Borg featured quite heavily in the later series of seasons of Voyager there. I'm just trying to think. I mean, apart from perhaps, going and seeing Neelix, who stayed behind in the Delta Quadrant, where he kind of hooked up with or married that woman, that Talaxian woman on the colony or whatever. Apart from sort of, seeing what Neelix is up to, perhaps. I'm trying to think whether any other interesting races that we kind of came across in Voyager that would be interesting to revisit. I think obviously the Borg were a big part of that. So I think we sort of covered. My feeling is I think that we sort of explored the Delta Quadrant quite a bit throughout the course of Voyager. So what is your favourite race of villains? Borgs, Romulans, Cardassians, etc. Look, I mean, as a threat, obviously the Borg are pretty ominous. I think the Federation has never been so under threat, I think, in the encounters that they've had with the Borg. But obviously other races, such as the Cardassians, I think the Cardassians are so kind of cunning and underhanded or whatever with the whole Obsidian Order and all that sort of stuff, and very secretive and all that sort of stuff. I think there was some really good Cardassian episodes of DS9 that were intriguing as well. I mean, I liked the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta. I thought that whole element of the Dominion was really interesting, in the fact that you got the Dominion and you've got the leaders of the Dominion being the shapeshifters or the founders, and then you had the Vorta, which were the kind of the officers of the Dominion, and then the Jem'Hadar, who were the soldiers of the Dominion. I thought that was a kind of an interesting dynamic, because you had the brains and you had the leaders and you had the muscle. So I think that would be an interesting villain to see back, perhaps, in Star Trek. I think I'd probably like to see that whole dynamic of the Dominion, perhaps in some capacity, again. I think Romulans and Cardassians and so forth are interesting villains, but I found the Dominion to be quite intriguing in DS9. So I think, I'd like to see a reference to them pop up at some point in the future. Again, would be interesting too. Any other questions? We're about 5 minutes left of the live stream, so we'll make it an hour. So yeah, if there's any other questions for the last 5 minutes, please don't be shy to fire away with them. In other, obviously in the coming week or whatever, we've got the premiere of Picard happening this coming week in about 5 days' time. I'll definitely be, no doubt, doing a breakdown and review on that when it comes out. We also got the Picard Countdown comic coming out the week after that. So that will be the finale of the 3-part Picard Countdown comic coming out on the 29th, I believe. It was meant to be out on the 15th of January, but apparently there was a delay in the publisher in some capacity. So yeah, that's been rescheduled to the 29th. So I'll have a review and breakdown of the final episode of that Picard Countdown comic when that comes out as well. Apart from Star Trek, what is your next favorite sci-fi series apart from Star Trek? Probably, I think, apart from Star Trek, I think Babylon 5 is one of my favorite sci-fi series. Love Babylon 5. Was a great show, really well written, great characters. Was one of those shows that, you know, I wish had got an extra season. I think, yeah, I'd have to say outside of Star Trek, my next favorite sci-fi series after Star Trek will probably have to be Babylon 5. Stanlow Crickets asks, do you think Q will appear in season 2? I think there's probably a very good chance. I think throughout the course of Next Generation, I think Q was such an integral character in the Next Generation series. I think he had this link with Picard that started right from the very first episode of Encounter at Farpoint and stretched right through the entire series to the final episode. I think that there is a very good chance we will see Q pop up at some point, maybe even in season 1 of Picard. You don't know. I know there were kind of some perhaps rumors going around there that there might be a appearance from Q, some perhaps leaked photos, not of Q, but just some little aspects that that could point subtly in the direction of an appearance by Q. So I think there's a very good chance that that we might see Q pop up, if not in season 1 of Picard, then I think probably in season 2 there'd be a good chance of that. Fingers crossed, because Q, I mean, that whole dynamic between, you know, Picard and Q was always such a great one to watch on screen, and the dynamic, you know, between those two characters was always, you know, very entertaining to watch. Yeah, I agree. Q is a great character, and I think you wouldn't have to probably do much work in terms of Q. What they could do, I think, when Q appeared, is you perhaps, if I was say directing an episode where Q appeared, you know, obviously John Delancey is aged like the rest of the cast of Next Generation and so forth. So obviously he's now looking older, but on the basis that the Q judge's robes kind of encompass his entire face and just have kind of this bit showing through, you could have Q appear with de-aging makeup or whatever, or using the new deep fake technology. So use reference shots from the last time we saw Q, perhaps in All Good Things, in the last episode of Next Generation. Or I think he popped up in a couple of episodes of Voyager too. So maybe even use reference shots from Voyager there for Q, and then have him look at Picard and go, "Oh, mon Capitan, you know, I like this new, you look so seasoned and so mature," or whatever, you know, and then he can click his fingers and flash, and then suddenly Q appears, you know, in a older sense, you know, in John Delancey, how he would appear, you know, present day anyway. So I think there's easily, you know, Q can appear however he likes. Q could appear as a, you know, 1,000-foot tall octopus if he wanted to. So I'm sure if Q chooses to appear as an older version of Q, aka John Delancey in 2020, I think that would be great to see. So there you go. So all right, guys. Well, thanks so much for a question from. Okay, do you fear a Picard show with very little Star Trek exploring? I don't fear it. I think if we see I think if the characters are good and the characters and their interactions and the spirit of the show is fundamentally Star Trek, and we're dealing with issues of the day within the Federation, and there's hopefulness there. It doesn't worry me too much that we're not off exploring the galaxy and exploring strange what was the strange civilizations and new life and all that sort of stuff. I think it doesn't worry me too much. I think provided at its core that it's Star Trek. There's more to Star Trek, and there's more to the tone of Star Trek than being exploratory. I think that obviously is a big part of it, and I think we can explore new elements of what's going on in the Alpha Quadrant, and explore new aspects, whether that be what the Romulans are doing, experimenting with the Borg, or what. I think fundamentally, if the tone and flavor of the show is fundamentally Star Trek, and it's a hopeful show and a hopeful series and not a dystopian one, then I think I will be happy with this new show. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining our very first live stream here. I'm Nick. Please subscribe, like. I'll be coming up with more videos, obviously in the next week or so, as the new series hits our screens. Thank you so much for joining the very first live stream. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye.